My name is Tevin Otieno. I'm 23 years old. I'm a software engineer. I enjoy my life. I'm happy. I describe myself as happy. I've spent my life split up in between different cities and different countries and learning from different kinds of people. And the culmination of that is what I'm trying to harness right now for my job. My mom's the noisy one. My dad's the quiet one who says nothing when he knows he's right. And then the moment him and I and the guy is just like, Mama yako, they love each other. They love each other so much. They're the one long distance relationship that I've seen work out. My mom lives in South Africa with my sisters and my dad lives here. And whenever she's traveling, for example, she could be going from Joburg to Zambia, but she'll somehow manage to get a flight through Nairobi and then extend her layover from 2 hours to 2 days so that she can spend some time with my dad. They remind me that everyone's a human being, because as I've grown up, I've also been able to see their flaws and how those flaws manifest in the way that they live their lives, but how they can identify that in themselves and figure it out and just move on and keep working hard. I love them and I want to eventually be in love like them one day. About manhood, funny enough, I think a significant amount of my manhood came from my mom. She works in gender, and I can't not be a feminist in my family. And my dad's a Navy man, so he's also very militant about some of his ideologies. But funny enough, my dad, in teaching me how to be a man, a lot of what he taught me was to listen and to consider and to take care of and to make sure that the people around you don't get hurt from the power that you have or the influence that you have over them. And eventually that manifests itself in interesting ways. So for example, for my mom, I think she's taught me how to look at things from a completely different perspective, which has affected how many people perceive my manhood, for example. My dad obviously hates that I have long hair, but he's okay with it because, my choice, whatever. The life of a 23-year-old is a lot of internal turmoil. I'm constantly confronted by, am I doing the right things from the perspective of my parents, from the perspective of my superiors, from the people that I work with, from the people that I meet? I think it's interesting seeing people switch their perspective of you between seeing you and then maybe hearing you speak and then maybe seeing the output of your work. And if I can do something to be the living embodiment of don't judge a book by its cover, then I'll have accomplished something. I like being young. I think the best part about being young is you can make ignorant mistakes and get away with them for the most part. You can decide you don't like your job and you quit and you move halfway across the world, and it's largely okay. I want to also exploit that as best as I can. Generational gap, I guess, is, okay, from my perspective, I think what ends up happening is just because of the way the time periods worked out, around the times my parents were being raised was just like post-colonial Kenya kind of thing. And economy wasn't the same as it was right now. So a lot of what they were raised with was work hard equals success. And for them, measures of success might have ended up being an engineer, being a man in the army, for example, working at a big company. Unfortunately, I think oftentimes once that success is achieved, the same metric is pushed onto millennials or Gen Y or Gen Z or whatever it is. Work hard equals success. But you're also told you're special and there's nothing else about it. If you just put in work, you will eventually be successful. And you get raised like that, and then the moment you graduate and you're put into the workforce, you realize, kumbe, it's nowhere near the reality, right? There's hundreds of thousands of people who are told exactly the same thing. All of them also worked hard. Not all of them can be successful. So I think the nuance of like figuring out how to be a useful member of society gets lost in a lot of the generational gap that we have. Fortunately, at least for me, I think my parents, we have arguments, but it reaches a point where you kind of start to trust each other's judgment, and they'll course correct where need be, but not also impose their thoughts on what my like career or life or big picture decisions are. But I think that the realization that the way that the older generation was brought up and the economy and the like socioeconomic kind of climate of that time is not the same as it is right now, and the same rules don't work, the same rules don't apply. I think after my first year of university, I had gotten a scholarship to school, and I was going to school in Boston. But because this was the first time in my life where I really had freedom, and I realized that like I didn't have to go to class or didn't have to actually hand in the homework, and my parents weren't there to like, you know, helicopter and make sure I'm doing things the right way, I exploited it. Sem 1 came and went, grades were down. Sem 2, even worse. I get a letter from scholarship committee and they told me they took away my scholarship because of grades. I remember when I went home for Christmas that year, or for summer break rather that year, and my mom saw my transcript and she was kind of just like, well, apply to JK Watt. Like, we can't pay for this anymore, it's impossible. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And you know, it's the accumulation of just like, I know that I didn't have to do this. I've disappointed everyone who's worked hard to support me to get me to this point. I know exactly the choices I definitely should have made. Like, there's no one else to blame but myself. After a long discussion with my parents and a very, very long email to the scholarship committee, they gave me one more semester to spring back up, and I worked the hardest I could, and I got my grades up, and I managed to get my scholarship back and finished school, fortunately. At least the outcome was, and I'm happy that it didn't take a worse situation in my life to come to that, was just the realization that the decisions you make now have consequences later. And trying to think about those consequences before you make the wrong decisions now. But I'll never forget that. I think I'm most proud of the fact that over the course of the years, I've learned how to be myself and how to think for myself. I was a very different person even 5 years ago. When I went into university, I had a completely different perspective on life and on how to make decisions and how to build relationships and all of this. And of course, a lot of it came from the people that I surrounded myself with. I was one of those sheltered kids who like went school, home, school, home, school, home. And learning how to formulate thoughts and make decisions and try to think through them, but for yourself, is something that I'm happy I can, to some extent, comfortably do now, and I wish other people would pursue as well. Yeah, like, we're all human beings, honestly speaking. I think empathy solves a lot of the problems that we have. If you can just try and put yourself in someone else's shoes, or try to understand where someone is coming from, try to listen to them, and not just like hear what they're saying, but like listen to them and try and figure out why they think the way they think and how they've been able to come to that conclusion. I think a lot of the drama and politics that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis becomes significantly easier. Just like love each other, be happy, live your days day by day.